This week's question to answer down in the comments is, I want to hear your favorite holiday horror movies. Now, these can either be explicitly holiday-related movies, or they can be horror movies that, for whatever reason, you just watch around the holidays. Ho, 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 hello, I am Adam Caesar, and this is Project Black T-shirt, and I am going to take off the Santa hat right now. This is the channel where we talk about new or reissue horror movies and then pair them with reading recommendations that you will enjoy if you like those movies. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more like this video. Now, I don't know what you asked Santa for this year, but if you were extra good, boys and girls out there in internet land, you probably asked him, and you're probably going to receive a copy of my book, Clown in a Cornfield. It won the Bram Stoker Award. It's a teen slasher. Clive Barker called me an author who knows how to make us afraid. Or its sequel, Clown in the Cornfield 2, Friendo Lives, that just came out this year. Or if you have those already, if you're a true Friendo fan, you might want to get Dead Mall. This is a 4-issue comic book miniseries. The first 2 issues are out now from Dark Horse Comics. It has art by David Stahl. It is about a possessed shopping mall. And if you're not a comic book reader, or you don't collect single issue floppy issues, the trade paperback is now up for pre-order. I'll put the links down in the description where you can get that, where you can get all my other books and help support me and help support the channel. But we would really, really, really appreciate you picking up Dead Mall, either single issues or the trade paperback. Trade paperback, I think, is out in June. And the little teaser just for you guys on the channel here, the cover to the trade paperback, if you go to Amazon, if you go to Barnes & Noble, it looks like this. It looks like David Stahl's cover for issue 1. But that's just a placeholder. There is a very cool, very secret alternate cover to the trade paperback that your paperback will include. It's really, really cool. I mean, not that this cover isn't beautiful and awesome, but we wanted to do something a little special and make the trade paperback a little bit more collectible and cool. Today, I wanted to get on here and I wanted to talk about holiday horror films, and this video was initially just going to be one release. I was just going to talk about one, but something kind of came out of left field, a movie that I hadn't had high expectations for, hadn't had high hopes for, that I watched just before I'm sitting down to record this, and I was like, you know what? We're going to talk about 2 great holiday horror releases that are just recently out on Blu-ray. And they are the Silent Night, Deadly Night collection out from Vestron. This is the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Silent Night, Deadly Night films. And Don't Open Till Christmas out from Vinegar Syndrome. And if you'll notice, I'm covering that. And we'll see why when we talk about Don't Open Till Christmas. The Silent Night, Deadly Night collection, Vestron video. I've talked about some Vestron releases on the channel before. I've not done a whole bunch of their releases. I own a lot of their releases. I think I might have talked about Chopping Mall, and I think I might have talked about Blood Diner, and I think I might have talked about... I talked about Shivers for sure, because Shivers was a great disc. The weirdest thing about these, and before we even start talking about the movies themselves, is that Vestron randomly, like, their pricing just seems to fluctuate all over the place. Like, something like Maximum Overdrive will be like $30 hard. You can't find it at any other retailers for like less than the MSRP. And then you'll have something like Silent Night, Deadly Night collection, which is, this is not a budget collection. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about the features, but this is 3 separate discs. Each movie gets its own discs, each with its own extras. And this one's like, for whatever weird reason, like started out as like $15, and now like Amazon a few days before release at least has it for like $11 or something like that, and Diabolic has it really cheap as well. But I just don't understand why their prices are all over. But my best guess is that these are Vestron's owned by Lionsgate, and Lionsgate's kind of a bigger company. They're kind of a, they're a mini major studio. They just, they can spring for it. The margins don't have to be as wide for them to make a profit. But that's neither here nor there. The Silent Night, Deadly Night collection. Silent Night, Deadly Night is an interesting franchise, and I use interesting in both senses of the word, and that it's actually interesting, and it's also somewhat dubious. First movie, your absolute classic Killer Santa movie. Guy goes nuts, goes on a killing spree, dressed in a Santa suit because something traumatic happened to him around Christmas time relating to Santa, which, defined a whole subgenre of movies that range from like really bad to like really good, like Christmas Evil that technically describes Christmas Evil, and that movie's amazing. That's like one of my favorite movies. But the Silent Night, Deadly Night, in my mind, the first two films have always kind of been the middle of the pack, the middle of the slasher Santa pack. There's some fun stuff in both. There's the kind of ridiculousness and the reused footage of part two and Garbage Day and all this kind of quotable, memeable stuff. But the 3, 4, and 5 have always been the more interesting ones to me, just because they're very, very, very weird films, and they're weird films for a myriad reasons, a myriad of production and story and creative reasons. But they're all very different. And we're going to go through briefly now and talk about each one. Then I'll just talk about which ones I like the best, and then we'll talk about the extras on this. Silent Night, Deadly Night 3, that one's subtitled Better Watch Out, is the only one of these three movies that has any kind of connection to the previous two films. And it's a really, really tenuous connection because it doesn't feel like Silent Night, Deadly Night 1 or 2. Even though the main character, or the slasher character, is Ricky. In this film, he's played by Bill Moseley, and that's not the only thing where he doesn't look like himself. He's got a big kind of mad scientist style brain cap, like they've been doing some kind of surgeries on him, it's unclear, either to keep him alive after his death in the last films. They've done some kind of Dr. Frankenstein thing to him. He's supposed to be the Santa Claus killer, and they do like 1 or 2 cutaways to the last movie to kind of put that connective tissue in there, but it really does stand alone. I know there's people that are going to be down in the comments being like, no, it's the same guy, but I think you could watch this movie without ever having seen or heard of the other two movies, and it would play exactly the same. The other weird thing about this movie is that it's directed by Monte Hellman, and Monte Hellman, no stranger to B-movies and things like that, because he was working with the Cormans for his first film, Beast from Haunted Cave, and but then he went on to do some pretty acclaimed highbrow movies like Two-Lane Blacktop with James Taylor, which I'm pretty sure is in the Criterion Collection, and Cockfighter with Warren Oates. He's just made some interesting movies, and movies that are kind of all over the place. Silent Night, Deadly Night 3, to me, watching it, is not really Hellman slumming, and he doesn't really just hand in the most meat and potatoes, bare minimum kind of movie. I think of the kind of original trilogy, it's kind of the most well-made and most sturdy of the films. And that's especially interesting when you consider that all three of these movies were direct-to-video movies. These were straight-to-video movies, and when you put these into play, you're going to notice that they're that full-frame, pillbox on the sides, 4x3 look to them. But as cheap as they are, that restriction opens up creativity in whole other areas, which I think is what makes these movies so special. Silent Night, Deadly Night 3, as far as slasher sequels go, it is Ricky in a hospital being experimented on by this scientist, psychologist, who's using a blind girl. She's a volunteer. He's using her to try to connect psychically with Ricky. And like the end point of this experiment is very unclear, because Ricky's just sitting there in a coma. Blind girl's trying to kind of go back and forth, and it's really unethical. And she's got a brother who takes good care of her and is kind of a nice guy, even though he seems like he would be your kind of traditional dirtbag cannon fodder character. Him and his new girlfriend. Needless to say, at the one act break of the movie, it's Christmas night. The hospital staff gets obliterated by Ricky as he wakes up from his coma, and he's just going after this girl who he's now psychically connected to, and he's like doing like this kind of cross-country road trip during Christmas time. It's very Christmassy. It's very weird and floaty in a lot of its choices. It has this great late 80s cheapo, but still really endearing aesthetic to it. I really, really like Silent Night, Deadly Night 3. Then we have Silent Night, Deadly Night 4, which is directed by Brian Usna. Brian Usna directed Society, directed Bride of Reanimator, directed Return of the Living Dead Part 3. He is a very, very, very underrated director, and I think you look at something like Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 4, and along with Society, two movies that aren't sequels, that aren't spin-offs of other things he was involved as a producer and stuff like that. And you look at the originality there in those movies, and it gives you really a whole new respect for him. At least it did for me. But Silent Night, Deadly Night 4, despite being the fourth entry in a series, is kind of the first anthology entry of these series. It has a real Halloween 3 Season of the Witch vibe, and not just because it completely disregards the Ricky storyline, completely disregards the Killer Santa storyline. It's barely set around Christmas. There's like a couple shots with like some tinsel in it and stuff like that, but Christmas doesn't factor into the story pretty much at all. It is about a young woman. She's a reporter. There is a big story that she wants to go after in LA. There's a spontaneous human combustion story that she really thinks she could go after it. And everyone in her office they're all men, they're all sexist. They're like giving her the classified job, giving her like the non-investigative jobs. She wants to figure out what is behind the spontaneous human combustion thing. And it gets her wrapped up with a witch cult that is very untraditional in the way witches are usually represented in this. Usna talks about how he wanted it to be like the cult of Lilith. It's very biblical. There's a lot of stuff going on with religion and belief in the movie, because the guy she's dating is Christian and his family celebrates Christmas and she's Jewish, and it's an interesting sidebar to all this witchy paganistic imagery that is by Screaming Mad George, the incredible special effects artist who's working really, really cheaply here and working really, really limitedly, but is putting these like giant cockroaches and maggot monsters that are like going inside people's bodies. He's putting all these really cool, they call them like surrealistic visuals. They call it that in the opening credits for Screaming Mad George's title card. He's putting all this stuff on screen for very, very little money, and it's really, really impressive. That might be my favorite one of the three. And then we have Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, which is another one that Usna's involved with. He co-writes it, he produced it, and then his friend Martin Kitroser directs it. And Usna talks about on the special features how he felt bad about Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 4 completely throwing out the Killer Santa conceit, kind of like feeling like he was above it and didn't want to do it. And then he had such a good time on that, and it came so easily that he was like, you know what, for Part 5, let's bring back a Killer Santa, but in a very different kind of way. The big name talent in Part 5, aside from a returning Clint Howard from Part 4, whose character is also named Ricky, but something happens in Part 4 to make me seriously doubt it's the same character. Part 5, the big star is Mickey Rooney, who plays a character named, I want to get this right because I don't want to spoil it for you, Joe Petto, who is a toy maker, who has a son named Pino. And he's just like kind of weird, and we start with this cold open where a present gets delivered to a kid's house with a kid's name on it and says, don't open till Christmas. And he opens it, and a toy comes out that kills his dad. So that's where we're starting. This is a kind of killer toy movie. This is a kind of Pinocchio riff. This is a kind of Killer Santa movie. It's all of them thrown into a blender, and it's very, very weird, and it's very, very out of left field, and has, again, visuals by Screaming Mad George, who doesn't have as much to do in this film as he did in Part 4, but he gets a really cool kind of final villain reveal in the last 10 minutes. It looks really neat. Yeah, Part 5 is wild, is awesome. It has the interesting kind of anecdotal factoid about it that when the first Silent Night, Deadly Night came out, there was a ton of protests at theaters across the country, concerned mothers groups and all these different people, and it got a lot of free publicity, and it got like kind of ran out of town in a lot of places because people did not want to see a Killer Santa. They thought it was like ruining the season and ruining the magic for kids. And one of the people who kind of came out really hard against this in Hollywood was Mickey Rooney. And Mickey Rooney's like, oh, this is terrible. They're ruining Christmas for all these kids. You know, flash forward to the early 90s, and he is front and center. He is the star of Silent Night, Deadly Night 5. Yeah, watching all three of these in a row in these new Blu-rays, there was a multi-pack version of this that I think had had a Killer Santa on the thing, making it really look like a continuation of the main series, the last DVD version of this. But those were standard definition. They looked completely blown out. They looked probably only marginally better than these movies looked when they were first on VHS. But these new transfers of these movies, it's like seeing them for the first time. There's something about, I can't quite describe why I find it so pleasing, the aesthetic of movies that were never meant to look this good, that were meant to be direct-to-video movies, and they kind of were going to live on tape forever with that boxy look to them. Seeing those movies cleaned up and in high definition feels cooler to me and feels like a bigger jump than some of these theatrical movies getting really nice and lavish, like 4Ks and stuff like that. But I love the look of them. The special features, which the back of the box is what I noticed. The back of the box is like is misprinted or went to press time like earlier than they had even aligned the special features, because there's actually more features on these discs than are even on here. There is this like long 3-part interview with the producer who had gotten the rights and gotten these movies off the ground, and he kind of takes you through step by step how each one was made. That's split across 3 different discs. Commentaries with everyone except Monty Hellman. There's interview with Clint Howard, interview with Bill Moseley, interview with Brian Usna, 2 interviews with Screaming Mad George. It's really, really, really stacked. And these are long, like 20-minute pieces. These aren't little like fluff things. It's unbelievable the amount of work that went into this, and the fact that you can like buy it for $11 right now, even if you're like kind of interested or like only one of the movies sounded good to you. I would really, really suggest just buy this thing. It's awesome. How we doing with time? Okay, this is meant to be a quick episode, and I'm talking for 20 minutes about goddamn Silent Night, Deadly Night. All right. Next up, I want to talk about Don't Open Till Christmas. I'm going to take the Vinegar Syndrome slipcover off because there are boobs on it, and I'm pretty sure YouTube's going to be upset with that. But I did want to point out the very cool. It's you open up the slipcover, and it's a Christmas card signed by all the Vinegar Syndrome guys. That's kind of a neat touch. But this is a movie that I had heard about and had buddies who'd seen, and I'd always kind of seen the poster that looks like this. There's the alternate art. And I'd never heard anyone say really any good things about it, so I'd kind of never really been that interested in it. But Vinegar Syndrome did it, came with my subscription. It was around Christmas time. I'd just kind of come off watching the Silent Night, Deadly Night movies. And I was like, you know what, let's go for more Christmas slashing. Let's check this out. And I love when I go into something with like unjustly low expectation and end up just completely blown away by it. Don't Open Till Christmas is it's an absolute mind melter of a movie. It has a very, very, very simple premise. There is someone going around London dressed in a kind of semi-transparent, one of those semi-transparent kind of Halloween or New Year's masks. And he's just killing anyone dressed as a Santa Claus. He's killing kind of Salvation Army Santas. He's killing guys going to Christmas parties. He's killing department store Santas. He is just there are so many Santa deaths in this movie, and it's kind of interesting coming off of Silent Night, Deadly Night, Killer Santas to going to Santas killed in Don't Open Till Christmas. And it's kind of a police procedural. It's kind of a like a whodunit. The movie was made with its original director, Edmund Purdom, who also stars in it, kind of a Hollywood actor who wanted to make movies and made this movie with producer Dick Randall, who did Pieces and a lot of other kind of sleazy Euro movies. He made his movie, handed it in. The producers looked at it and were like, "We gotta spice this up. We gotta fix this somehow." Brought in Alan Birkinshaw, who did a bunch of kind of British horror movies and movies shot in the Philippines and stuff like that. He did most notably Killer's Moon, and he tried to insert like new characters into the movie that had already been made and didn't want to have to bring in the old actors and stuff like that, and especially didn't want to bring in Edward Purdom because he was the star, but he also made the movie and didn't want to step on his toes. So he like wrote like 40 minutes of new material that they shot and then edited it into this. And you'll watch the movie and you know something's up with it. It has such a weird cadence to it. It has such a like some of the performances are just really bad and odd. and then some of the gore and set pieces and stuff are like really good and really amazing. So, and it has this weird kind of lumpy texture to it and lumpy pace, but it's completely hypnotic. It's never ever boring. There's so much unbelievable location shooting in London in this movie. There's like, you see West End theaters where Carolyn Monroe is randomly playing and singing for one of the murder sequences. There's the London Dungeon, like wax museum. You see inside it, you see like all this crazy stuff. Like they just got either no permits or just had incredible pull with all these different places and businesses and locations in London, because they shoot all over, like Piccadilly Circus, and it's unbelievable how much early 80s London is in this movie, and it's just got a great feel to it. Me as an American, as someone who enjoys Christmas and enjoys Christmas time and knows what like Christmas in New York looks like from a million movies and from living there, and there's something about a really, really British Christmas, and it's so different and so kind of appealing. At the same time, you're getting like Santas like garroted and then their faces pushed onto roasting chestnuts, and they set on fire, and then a guy getting electrocuted by a car, and just a man in the Peep Show getting his brains blown out while dressed as Santa. There's just something amazingly weird and sleazy and wild about this movie. The best way I can kind of describe it is it feels like a Pete Walker movie in its sleaziness and its Britishness, but not in its execution. Like it's like definitely like a couple notches down from, but just weird and a mystery that like makes no sense, because then you realize that it had been carved out afterwards. Like they inserted a different killer in when they did reshoots. Just a weird movie, but something that I found so delightful. And there's a ton of special features on this disc. I've only watched like the first couple, and I'm going to continue with it. But it's just really great Christmas horror movie that I highly recommend. So that's that. These are these two. This week's book recommendation, I want to stay in that Christmas mode. I want to shout out the Valancourt Books Victorian Christmas Stories. These are anthology collections of 19th century Victorian stories that were always published like day of or week of Christmas in these British newspapers, that have become like a kind of big thing, and everyone knows Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, but they've gone through and they've found all these like lost and some of them unattributed ghost stories that were like a big thing around Christmas in Victorian England, but they're really cool, and they've made them very accessible. I have the Kindle versions of them. There's a bunch of volumes, and just a kind of unique thing to get you in the mood for Christmas. Thank you so much. Have a happy holiday. Please pick up the books. Please pick up the Clown of the Cornfield books. Pick up Dead Mall. We really appreciate it, and happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. I hope you have a really good one, and I'll see you in the new year when we'll talk a lot more horror movies and horror books. And I really appreciate everyone who's taken the time to buy a book, to comment on the channel, to subscribe, just to reach out and tell me they like the stuff I'm doing. So thank you, and best to you and yours.